Ladies and gentlemen, it is that time. We're back. It's a weekly vibe. Me and Ian are here, and once again, we have a guest with us. Mr. Guest, would you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, it's Cecil. Big voice reveal
Cecil. Welcome,
here on the
Cecil. We're
Weekly
glad to have
Vibe.
you.
Yeah, we're really happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Wanted to
Perfect.
do a podcast for a long time, never got it together. So happy y'all are doing the commitment and effort part, and I can just be a guest.
Oh, yeah, of course. So, real quick, just to start off, we want to go with a mini topic today. Yes, a couple of days before the draft. Would you guys consider it a big trade happened today?
I would think so, yeah. I think it's it's the first trade really. So I think
Yeah.
it's pretty big for the moment, yeah.
So we'll go over that real quick. Some real NBA news. Today let me pull up the trade details. It was between Memphis and New Orleans. Let's see. Where's the official trade at? Okay. Memphis finalized a trade to send Jonas Valanciunas and 2021 New Orleans 17 and 51st picks to New Orleans for Steven Adams, Eric Bledsoe, 2021 picks number 10 and 40, and a projected 2022 first round pick via the Lakers.
Yeah, I think I'll jump in and say that I think it was a good trade for the Pelicans.
Oh, yeah.
They needed to shed that horrible contract of Steven Adams because he just doesn't work next to Zion. It's not viable.
Oh, yeah.
And they also got rid of Eric Bledsoe, which is just another W in that regard. I think Valanciunas will provide much better spacing for Zion than Steven Adams did, obviously. So I think it's a good trade for them, and it's a good trade for Memphis because they can do like a mini reset and build up their future instead of going all in for the 8th seed.
Right. Yeah, this benefits both sides a lot. I especially, like you said, I like it for New Orleans because even though Valanciunas isn't like a big spacer, he's still willing and he still opens up the floor way better for Zion.
Yes, absolutely.
And then Bledsoe being gone. Oh, sorry, Cecil, go ahead.
You go first. You were talking.
Okay, yeah. So, and Bledsoe being gone, it helps Lonzo Ball out if he comes back, and it really helps Zion out because Bledsoe wasn't helping either of them much at all.
I
Yeah,
agree
for
with that, and
sure.
I also think Steven Adams is kind of an interesting fit on the Grizzlies. He provides a little more defense and rim protection next to Jaren Jackson, who we
Needs
all
it.
had high hopes for as a rim protector, but it hasn't really panned out that way.
Right.
And Adams also not a bad role man for Morant. If Morant can add a little more of a threat to take the jumper coming off the screen, then that'll just open up the whole two-man game with Adams has that little floater, and you can put a lot of pressure on the rim that way. Adams also, and this startled me when I looked it up, he's only 27 years old.
Yeah.
So, Memphis with these picks and with the Bledsoe contract, they're clearly not looking to contend right now. But if Adams sticks around for a few more years, he may not be totally done by the time they want to be a contender.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one thing that we forget, he left after his freshman year at Pittsburgh. So it kind of makes sense. Like he has been in the league for a while, but he is still pretty young
Oh,
for how long
absolutely.
he's been in the league.
Yeah, he's technically, in terms of age, he's still in the prime of his career.
Yep.
He's younger than
Absolutely.
Valanciunas.
Yeah. That's what surprised me. I thought Valanciunas was way younger. Like,
Yeah. I've never really paid attention to Jonas Valanciunas' age. So
me neither.
I mean, I could see that. I also follow college basketball pretty closely, so I feel like I knew that Adams was that young, but it still is kind of surprising when you think about it.
It's because we saw him on
Absolutely.
so many contending OKC teams. Once you see a guy on a bunch of good teams, you feel like he's, a veteran who's been around for forever, even if he came into the league super young.
Right.
It is wild that he was only 23 on that 2017 Thunder team.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, he
pretty
is.
funny to think about.
That's wild. Yeah, like this for both sides, it should pan out pretty well. I really like it, especially
and
for the Pelicans.
Yeah, especially for the Pelicans, but I also think Memphis is going to try to get rid of that Bledsoe contract.
Oh yeah,
So Bledsoe will be free to probably sign with whoever and maybe develop into a role style player. Because he digressed so much from Milwaukee to New Orleans. So
yeah,
definitely a
and
good move.
yeah. Another possibility that opened out of this is that ESPN was reporting that the Pelicans also have interest in Kyle Lowry if Lonzo Ball doesn't work out.
That's interesting. I like that. Even though Lowry's pretty old, it
Yeah.
means that they're into contending like right now,
Right.
which is nice to see.
Lowry and Ball, kind of interestingly similar player types. Point guards who
Right.
can play off the ball, defend a couple different positions, make some shots.
Yeah.
Lowry,
Yeah,
obviously, several tiers better than Ball,
Right.
with respect to how well Ball has developed, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think this is a good first trade to start off the off season, and I'm sure we'll see something happen either right before the draft or during the draft, which would be pretty cool to see.
Absolutely.
So, are we ready to move into the next topic? I feel like we
definitely
are.
That was a good little short summary of what went down.
Yep, for sure.
All right. So, heading into our first topic, we wanted to cover players that we think are either enhanced or get worse by the whole context or situation of an all-time draft team. Would either of you like to start?
Why don't we let our guest start?
Cecil.
All right. Should I just go down my list of players, or should we kind of trade off one player at a time?
I think we can rotate.
Why don't you
all right.
just list the player and then describe why you feel that way, or you don't have to.
Sounds good. So, the first guy who I think this player's value increases in an all-time draft compared to real life is Michael Cooper. Was the first example I thought of when we decided on this topic. He's a shooting guard who can play point guard or small forward, very switchable player. Played for the Showtime Lakers with Magic Johnson, as y'all know. And he was their sixth man for most of that time. He came off the bench behind Byron Scott. But the thing that makes him a clear starter in an all-time draft is just his versatility. He was the 1987 Defensive Player of the Year, so he's a top shelf defender, and he can guard a lot of different player types. Like he played point guard, but he also guarded Larry Bird. He can switch up and down and remain really effective. And then on offense, he takes open threes. His volume wasn't ever super high, but you can chalk part of that up to the era. And he's a good secondary playmaker as well. So he has a lot of skills. So you can fit him into a lot of different types of teams. And additionally important is not just that he's a well-rounded player, but he is really like top shelf good at certain skills like defense. I give him a lot of shooting credit because he always got better in the playoffs and he got better as his volume went up. But your mileage may vary on that because his actual numbers are not impressive compared to more recent players. But I think you need to get more valuable in an all-time draft, you need to be able to fit in a lot of different spots, and you need to have certain skills that translate against higher talent, and Cooper has both of those things.
That's a very good example. I totally agree. And obviously in if we look at it by price here, he's $15, I believe, which you wouldn't really think for a guy who's a role type player off the bench, but He's so valuable in that regard.
He's a super good fit player, which boosts his value and makes him better in these for sure.
He'd probably be pretty surprised to learn he costs $15 though.
Yeah,
He
probably.
probably would. I think a lot of these guys would be surprised at their price if they
Dude,
cared.
Imagine Shane Battier looking at these.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Shane Battier, who's I think Isaiah Thomas would be quite disappointed with his price, but
I don't even want
Both
to
of them.
imagine what
Both
Isaiah
of them.
Thomas would say.
yeah,
Battier feels like the kind of guy who might understand. Like he might look at it and be like, "Okay, I understand why."
Yeah, Battier is a smart dude.
yeah, for sure. Do you want to go, Kev, or do you want me to jump in?
All right, I'll throw one in because I mentioned it in Mod Chat earlier, and Cecil was like, "Wow, I love that." I think one player that is enhanced by these, when you consider like how spacing boosts, how situations boost in general, I think Kevin McHale gets a really big boost in these.
I love this pick
Interesting.
because it is so unexpected, and I bet a lot of people would disagree with it.
Well, I mean, in general, I think one of the things that really go up in these, if you get him in the right situation, is efficiency. And Kevin McHale is already really, really good at that.
Yeah, he's starting. I completely agree with you, by the way, because he's starting from such a high place in an environment that's, pretty optimized for his skills, but not completely because of the era he played in. Three-point shooting was not as big of a deal, so it was much easier to come down and, cramp his moves and try to
Right.
deny him opportunities. Imagine Kevin McHale in a 5-out lineup, or a 4-out lineup is, I guess, what it would be.
Right. And like even then when he was playing in that more cramped era, he was still on like a relative true shooting of nearly like 12. Imagine translating
Absolutely
that to
wild.
today where his spacing benefits.
Interesting. I'm definitely someone who at first was like iffy on Kevin McHale, just because I had the more casual opinion that he was just a black hole. But I
Exactly.
actually watched more film and I saw like how much more of a willing passer he was.
Yeah.
Also, he had like a team where if he wanted to score, he absolutely could. Like that's
Yeah.
just how that team ran.
Yeah. The
So
thing that got Kevin McHale like hurt in the passing department is that it was already like an all-time great ball moving team. Like you
Yep.
didn't get to see him move the ball too much because the ball was moving to him.
Yeah, he was the worst passer on an all-time great passing team. He
Right.
doesn't have next level vision or anything like that, but he knows where his shooters are going to be, and
Yeah,
he's
it's
not against the idea of passing it.
yeah, it's still solid. Like it's fine. It translates okay.
He's looking
Yeah.
to score more often than not, but that's because he's catching the ball in position to score. That's his job. And sure, he
Right.
benefits from having Bird there, drawing the defense's attention, and Parrish and
Right.
whatnot, but in an all-time
That
draft context, he's going to
that
have
goes up way
comparable
more.
offensive support. Yeah.
Right. Right. Like and if you can get a team that has a lot of like spacing and gravity on it, Kevin McHale probably becomes a beast. Just like god tier.
Yeah, for sure.
Not to mention
Well, I
that
think
like he's a good defender too, which boosts his value even more.
Very
yeah,
switchable
absolutely.
defender.
Yeah.
Not many people can
I think
successfully guard Hakeem and switch on to small forwards.
Right.
yeah, that's a tall task, and he definitely can do that. I think a player that I have that I think would get better, in an ATD situation, even though he was pretty good with the Spurs, but it's Manu Ginobili.
Hmm.
He he had a pretty solid role, kind of like enhanced Michael Cooper per se, without amazing defense like he had, but he was a six man for that Spurs team. I just feel like in this setting, his ability to fit in almost any team and his portability. I know I said that word, crazy of me, but I did. Um, I just feel like that is so valuable and makes him so much better in that type of situation.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Actually,
Significantly positive defender too, by the way.
yeah.
Not Michael Cooper,
Oh yeah,
but
yeah, that's sort of what I meant.
yeah, I completely agree. But you'll never hear me say a negative word about Manu Ginobili.
That's fair. Yeah, I
Yeah,
like that pick.
I've only had the pleasure of drafting Manu Ginobili once. I think for the next ATD I do, I'm definitely gonna want to take him because I want to try and build a team not around him, but have him on a team. I think that would be fun. I have another player too that I feel will get boosted, and that's Rashard Lewis. A lot of the guys I picked are like really nice fit guys. So
Yeah,
Rashard Lewis is a spacing four and having positive defense, I think is incredibly valuable in this setting. Whereas in real life, I don't know if he would believe that he's $20. You know what I mean? So I feel like in this setting, he gets boosted. You know, he's a second rounder, late second, sometimes early third rounder, but he's definitely valuable next to like I like him next to Wilt Chamberlain, just because he can space and Wilt can kick it and hit him. So
yeah,
I really like him a lot too.
Rashard also a guy whose defense gets boosted by playing next to other good defenders, which we got no shortage of great center defenders in an all-time draft.
absolutely. That's a
Yeah,
really good point.
I don't know if you guys have any other players. I have a
Yeah,
couple
I'll
more,
throw one
but
out. I'll throw one out whose value decreases. Um, this is a pretty easy pick, but Russell Westbrook, MVP
Yeah,
level player at peak in real life. I mean, you can argue about whether or not Kawhi or Harden deserve that MVP, but
yeah,
Westbrook was MVP level that year. I'll give him his credit. But the thing is, in an all-time draft, it's it's hard to fit Westbrook next to other great players because him and Kevin Durant had success together, but they were pretty clearly not optimized because
yeah.
Westbrook doesn't have much of an off-ball game, not really a spacer, doesn't have amazing activity off the ball. So you need to put him on the ball to maximize his impact. But when you do that, unbelievable rim pressure, great scorer, but not really a next level like offensive decision maker, not elite at controlling the flow of the game. You can't trust him every time to come down the court and make the right decision about what shot to take or which teammate to kick it to. And I'm not saying he's bad at any of those things because, like I said, MVP level player in real life, one of the great offensive floor raising seasons to drag that Thunder team to the playoffs. But by the standards of all-time draft floor generals, there are guys who you can pick to maximize your other scores better because your team is always going to have one or two, more efficient scorers who you want to handle the bulk of the offensive load bearing before you're drafting Russell Westbrook. So it
Mhm.
becomes a situation where you're thinking, do I add more scoring or do I pick someone who maximizes my other guys, kind of organizes the offense a little better. And he doesn't have great peripheral skills either to fill in the gaps. Like he should be a better defender than he is, but he's really just doesn't have the focus and intensity on a 48-minute basis, even though he can turn it up for a few possessions at a time.
Right.
yeah, I'm not crazy about Russ either. I don't think I've ever drafted him just because I'm not exactly sure how to fit him. And I think that's the point you made. I don't know what a proper Russell Westbrook team would be. So in that regard, he loses value because
Yeah,
you
it's
just
just
don't know.
very, it's very, very hard to slot him into an offense next to other greats and visualize where he's going to get his possessions without taking away from other people. And he's in a weird like ADP spot too because he's very clearly better than point guards who have similar concerns like Gilbert Arenas, for instance. But you feel
Yeah,
better taking Gilbert Arenas in the fifth round because that's value as opposed to taking Westbrook in like the third.
yeah, I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think
It's just
he's definitely
really
one. Go ahead.
for like his price, which is about like $19. His builds can be too demanding for the price that he comes at.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Like, I can't think right now off the top of my head who I would. I mean, KD would be fine, I guess, but I don't know who I would put Harden with in an ATD. Just I haven't tried it yet.
Harden, another one.
Yeah.
I like the idea of a Westbrook Dirk team. I don't know if I've
Hmm.
ever seen that tried.
That would be
No, I
good.
think a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are afraid to do Dirk nowadays.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's true. You'd have to unite two much maligned fit players
Yeah.
yeah,
Yep.
for opposite reasons. Westbrook's a tough offensive fit, Dirk's a tough defensive fit.
yep, pretty
Don't
much.
tell Kev that. Kev will scream up until the heavens that Dirk is a small positive on defense and use
In real
that
life,
in real life. Yes. I think he's a 0.25 or whatever. I don't know how to use that metric system, but uh he yeah, when he drafts Dirk every time, it's Dirk is a small positive. Okay. I'd
He
like to
is.
I'd like to see him lock up, Shaq or Hakeem.
He would,
yeah,
But
to
and
be
then if
honest.
you play him at the four, it's a whole
yeah,
host of other problems.
yep. I think I think one player that lose I think loses value in an ATD is Amari Stoudemire.
Mm.
His his defense is not great, and he's was part of a offense that was very, I feel, system based, and he works amazing with Nash. But I'm not sure how many other players he really, really works with that well. So I think that's why when you look at the ADP sheet, he's not exactly, he's not like a $10 player. He's like $4 or $5, and I think that
Right.
killed his value. One is that he's a big and really is not good on defense, and two, he was in a very specific system, and then he went to New York, and he had what, one or two good seasons, maybe. I really can't remember because when he went to New York, it just felt like it all fell apart.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing
This is
about
the
him.
first one. You go ahead.
Yeah, he's pretty much like this was a point I have against a guy like Clay Thompson on offense. His offense can be very situational. Like you got to get him the right fit, or else I don't think he does much.
Mm, mm-hmm.
Now, this is the first one I really just disagree with you two on. I actually think Amari is drafted too low, and if his value doesn't go up, it stays the same, and that's only because he was already in an optimal situation in real life. He is an incredibly efficient scorer, like high volume, high efficiency, just all-time great roll man. He needs a pick and roll point guard to thrive, someone who can handle the ball and get it to him in his spots. But I mean, how many of those guys do we have? What team doesn't have a point guard that can run pick and roll at a high level? Maybe they're not Steve Nash, but like Amari and Deron Williams, for instance, that's a scary two-man game to me. He's also
Mm-hmm.
a pretty significantly underrated spacer, I feel. He had a face-up game. He took long twos. I think he has a better argument to develop a three than a lot of 2000s bigs. And the defensive criticisms are 100% fair. But one thing about him is that he can play both big spots. He can be a power forward or a center. So it's not as tough as you would think to fit him next to a great rim protecting big. Like, imagining a team starting, for instance, Tim Duncan next to Amare. I don't know how you guard that, and I don't think the defense is totally a lost cause. But if you try that, you'll be drafting Amare in what, round 6, round 7. You can almost surely get him in those spots, and that's like well below where you normally see starters go.
Yeah, I can understand that point. I just feel like he's to me he just feels like more of a specific fit that I have to try and find than other players. I feel like he's not. I don't know. I agree that he should be going for a bit more, but I also think that because of the defense and because he was in a specific system, it can make people feel like, okay, maybe he's not going to work with everybody. And I agree, like Darren Williams and Amari is a scary, scary thought. But
Yeah.
I don't know how much like his defense affects him.
His defense is real bad. I can't argue with you there.
Yeah, it's just atrocious. I mean, it's hard to want to draft somebody with unless you're Jokic, you're not going to draft somebody like that real high. So it's like it's just real hard. Like I don't know. It's a hard fit.
I can't argue with the defense, but on offense, my main thing is just if I had to put it in a sentence, that I think it's a good thing that he plays off of other guys.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
fair.
What about you, Kev? Who's your player that you feel like would lose some value in these situations?
Well, to mess with you a little bit, Ian, I think Marcus Smart gets worse in these.
Oh man. I'm gonna get relentlessly trolled about this, aren't I?
But unironically, though, I think an important thing, like when drafting in these, is IQ.
Yeah.
Like
He doesn't have that on offense.
like because the main thing is that like he's really overpriced, and at the same time, I feel like one of the main things about his value in defense, and that's kind of it. Like he's a great guard wing defender. There's not much he can do for you on offense other than be stupid.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I feel like
Go ahead, Cecil.
like
Oh, I didn't say anything.
Oh,
yeah, that was me.
swore you said something.
But yeah, I feel like in an all-time draft where you have better defenses, better or worse situations, Marcus Smart gets exposed a little more. Because when he does touch the ball, because he likes touching the ball, he's gonna get beat up.
Yeah. I think it's a hard thing in an ATD context. Like, I feel like there's going to be players like who are like I just obviously everybody knows I just drafted him with Jerry West. I feel like Jerry West would have to go over and like strangle him so he doesn't shoot like 6 times a
Right.
game. So, but like the thing that makes him valuable and the reason why we draft him is because of his defense. So
Right.
like we kind of live with the consequence of
Right.
his just horrific offensive IQ where he thinks he's a hooper. So
Right.
like it just like
But I mean, how valuable really is shooting guard Nate Thurman? You know.
yeah, put it that way. I mean,
That's incredible.
yeah,
I'm proud of that one.
yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, I've grown on him, not because I drafted him for $7, but because I like his defense more than I did before, and I've really
Right.
didn't value his defense correctly.
Yeah.
And his nail defense is just so elite. That it's why I would draft him now. but I'm never drafting him for $7 again, just so
No.
I don't get trolled any more than I already do.
Like his reasonable price, like I'd take him at like $3-4. I think that's
Yeah.
kind of it for me.
Yeah,
Did you guys
think
know
I-
Marcus Smart made half of his floaters this year?
really.
Wow. That's
Yeah, he came within 2% of making more floaters than shots at the rim.
Wow.
That's
I mean,
hilarious.
actually, more of his floaters than shots at the rim. He did make more floaters than shots at the rim total because he took more from that range.
Yeah,
That's hilarious.
he took a decline this year, but I think that was expected.
Yeah, his 3-point shooting has been going backwards.
Yeah, that's just not good, especially considering his 3-point shooting was never that great to begin with.
No.
He had a couple years there where he was like a 35% guy, and I think that's what made him draftable.
Right.
Yeah. Still, though, I mean, I don't really want him shooting if he's going to only make 35% of them. If I want a shooting guard, I'm going to get somebody who can actually shoot at a pretty high level.
Yeah.
But
It's
yeah,
time to make Raja Bell more expensive than Marcus Smart.
Hell yeah.
Cecil's going to like to hear that because he just drafted him in my server and is starting him. So
I think
he's
I
gonna
just
love
drafted
hearing
him in
it.
like 3 servers.
That's literally
Raja
me.
Bell.
That's literally me though with Boris Diaw of late. I've just been drafting him consistently, so I feel you on that one.
Let's see. I'm starting Raja Bell in your server. I was starting him in this server until I was knocked out of the playoffs by Gabe. Shout out Gabe. And I'm starting him in one other spot, but we'll get to that.
Nice.
I think I have another player that loses value. Moses Malone.
Yeah, he was on my list too.
Yeah, I think he just in this type of setting, like when he was playing back in the day, obviously he was incredibly dominant, one of the better centers of all time. But in this setting, I feel like we value people who are willing to pass more and aren't horrific passers. So I feel like he would be he has to be on a team where it's kind of like the Celtics, like we were talking about, where their passing is fluid and they have one guy like Kevin McHale who can score and it's not a big issue. He just, I feel like we need to boost him a little bit more because I feel like it's disrespectful. But at the same time, like he's too much of a black hole for ATDs, I guess.
It's always tough sledding in the all-time drafts for someone who gains a lot of his value through rebounding.
Yeah, yep, I agree.
Yep.
I mean, he's an all-time offensive rebounder, probably the best. But how valuable really is that? I'm not sure. I mean, rebounding isn't that important when you really think about it in a ATD context.
Yeah,
it's a replaceable skill, and if you get too much of it, you become vulnerable to transition play.
Right.
Yep. So I think in that sense he loses value, and I also think people believe, because how we do all-time drafts, if this is your first time listening, we expect them to be playing in this era. So it's not like you're getting 1983 Moses Malone or whatever his peak is. I can't exactly remember. I just went off his championship season there, but you're not getting that player from that season. It's transitioning into 2021.
Yeah.
And
well, you are getting that player from that season, but you're like putting him in a time machine and bringing him forward to the present day.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
It's why Adrian Dantley goes for like $1.
Yeah.
That's why Adrian Dantley doesn't get drafted. I mean, I've seen him drafted like 3 times.
Yeah.
So
Adrian Dantley might have made our lists if his real life value had been anything special.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
he's
the only thing you can say about Adrian Dantley is he was an efficient scorer.
Yeah.
He sure was.
I
Mhm.
mean,
Credit where credit's due.
yeah, it certainly is. Especially for a guy who was just, you know, everybody knew that he was gonna do everything he could to get the ball back to shoot.
right.
The fact that he's like what ninth all time in true shooting percentage is pretty incredible, in my opinion.
Yeah,
Um,
without even adjusting.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I think that Moses is someone, and I'm not sure Moses's defense will translate well to this era.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I'm not too sure about how his defense translates either.
Yeah, it's something that I've been thinking about. I really don't. I know he was a good defender for his era. Same thing with somebody like Elvin Hayes. I
Right.
just don't know. I don't know how well it would translate. Cecil, do you have an idea?
Um, I'm not up on my Moses Malone film, but I have sometimes wondered if we don't give him enough mobility credit. I feel like there's an assumption that he's just this plodding slow type. But if you look at his actual like build, his height and weight, he's not carrying a lot of extra pounds for how tall he is. And from what I've read from sources at the time about him, and I mean, this is all relative to late 70s, early 80s, but he was seen as like a real physical freak for the time. I was reading breaks of the game, and someone described him using like the guard in a center's body terminology,
Hmm.
and that's about young Moses Malone. But I wonder if he could have moved his feet a little better than we assume.
I
Maybe.
think we I think we tend to look at physical attributes a little too much sometimes and feel like,
Ooh.
oh, this person like somebody like a Wilt. Like people think like Wilt was just this mobile guy who couldn't really move. It's like, well, you're probably watching like old Wilt after he like ripped his patellar tendon in half and came back during the playoffs that same year, which is just an incredible injury to come back from, by the way. But like
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
he in his younger years, like especially when we draft him in '67, I mean he's one of the quickest players I've seen. Um, I think there's some story about him racing Jim Brown, the great running back, and Wilt beat him twice. And I think
Hmm.
that's like something like I think sometimes people like take that for granted, like how much of a physical specimen and how like mobile Wilt really was instead of like I don't know. It just feels like we look at like guys like even like Shaq was incredibly mobile for his size. I think
Yeah.
like I agree with Cecil in that regard. We're probably underrating the hell out of Moses Malone's mobility. And I've actually a '70s fan put up a game with I think it was the Sixers versus the Knicks maybe. Um Moses went full court, coast to coast, put up a layup. And I was like, whoa, is that Moses Malone doing that right now? Taking the ball up the court and going all the way in? And yeah, I was kind of surprised. So I definitely agree with you in that regard, Cecil.
Part of it also is that, straight line speed, very different thing from lateral speed. But if you have great straight line speed, you can use that to get back in plays and make up for getting blown by.
Yep.
Like you see that with Giannis a lot. He's not the quickest at moving his feet and staying in front of guards anymore, especially not compared to a few years back. But even if you drive past him, he can recover and smack it off the backboard anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Another
Absolutely.
interesting thing about Moses, and this is not high level analysis or anything, but he's not a huge shot blocking guy for the time. He made a couple all defensive teams, but tops out around 2 blocks per game, which for early 80s is nothing for a center.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
and they were judged a lot more on counting sets like that back then, so it implies he had to have been doing something else right. Now, whether that's post defense, quick hands, who's to say? He gets quite a few steals for a center as well.
Yeah, I think in general we probably underrate Moses way too much, especially for how great of a player he was like throughout his entire career.
Yeah.
Three-time MVP.
Yeah.
How many of those were deserved though?
Maybe one, maybe two.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure Kareem should have gotten one.
Kareem should have probably had 9, but who's counting? But yeah, I think that's definitely somebody who loses value.
Yeah, he's got a long way to go because he was. It's a case of being extremely, extremely valuable in real life to where you can still be a good player in an all-time draft, but you're losing value compared to the real life version of yourself.
Right.
Agreed. Do we have anybody else that you'd like to mention? Kev,
I got
Cecil?
somebody on a positive note who gains value,
Oh, go for it.
and that is Rasheed Wallace.
Oh yeah.
Underrated
Yes, yeah.
player in real life, probably suffered from some societal attitudes, which
One way to put it.
might have been seen a little bit differently if he'd had the good fortune to play 15, 20 years later. But
Yep.
he was never considered to be like best player on a title team type of player. He was like a tier down from the other great forwards of that early 2000s era. He never made an all NBA team, made like a few all star teams, but he was seen as like a great supporting player, lower level star.
Mm.
But he's, again, similar to Cooper. He's that type of well rounded player who can contribute in a bunch of different ways to where he turns into like a second round pick in an all time draft. His name is up there on the ADP sheet next to, let's see who's in between.
Paul Pierce and
He's in between Brandon Roy and Clyde Drexler,
oh wow, yeah.
which real life peaks, most people would probably say through the roof, no comparison above Rasheed Wallace, even if you're properly rating Rasheed.
Yeah.
But it's like it's again that thing where he can fit on any type of team almost because he can space, but he can also post up mismatches. If you try to play a small at the 4, he can take advantage of that. He's a really versatile defensive player. He adds a little rim protection, but he's not getting like roasted on small players or anything. So it's difficult to envision a team where he doesn't make sense. And that's why he ends up going so early every time because everyone wants him.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And also a little fun fact, I don't think Rasheed Wallace ever made an all defensive team.
He never did. Him and Sean Marion are probably two of the best defenders never to make all defensive teams.
Which is just crazy to think about because of how good defensively Marion was and how good defensively Rasheed was.
Yeah.
2000s was the golden age of power forwards, man.
Oh.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I really like that name just because he again is just such a good fit. And I especially think he's a good fit next to somebody like a Jokic. You know, we see the classic, you know, Larry Nance Sr. or Andre Kirilenko or who's the other one that Bobby Jones.
Bobby Jones.
Yeah. All those guys. Bobby Jones is another one who gets boosted, by the way. I'm not gonna go into detail, but he for sure gets boosted, I feel.
Absolutely.
And yeah, he works next to any big really well, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Kev, do you have any thoughts or anybody else you want to add?
I definitely go to Rasheed Wallace. One, I'll speed run through real quick because we're got another topic to cover. I think Deron Williams, someone who is a really high tier creator, high tier pick and roll point guard, passer in general, good shooter. I think he really gets boosted by these scenarios.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I feel like Darren's starting to get a little bit of a boost recently, which I like to see because he's just an amazing player.
Oh yeah,
I think
like
someone I'll throw out two names quick. Someone that I feel like get boosted. Definitely, I feel like Shane Battier and Eddie Jones get boosted.
oh yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that Battier's offensive game becomes way more valuable
yeah.
because you really can't. I don't feel like you can leave him alone because he's such a he knocks down his threes. It's not like he's shooting over 40% from there.
He's a tier above a lot of 3-and-D players.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Takes a lot of wing threes too, which is important. You can't just be a corner merchant.
Right.
Shout out.
Which I'll
PJ
segue into
Tucker.
another little speed run of someone I don't like, who I think loses value, is PJ Tucker.
Oh,
And that
yeah.
might be a little controversial because a lot of people like him, and he is that type of like well-rounded player who can fit into a lot of different situations. But my issue with him is that I just don't think he's good enough at any of his skills to provide true value. Like I think the increased talent level really hurts him because in real life he's a guy who gets by on being like okay at guarding a bunch of different positions so you can put him anywhere. And he like makes just enough of his corner threes to where in an all-time draft, I think there's just better guys you can get. I think he's at a physical disadvantage more often, and his defense suffers.
Right.
I threw that one in there to ruffle feathers, though. So
Yeah.
I think you're gonna get a resounding okay from Kevin and I with that because I don't think we are big PJ Tucker fans ourselves.
No.
I just don't like when I see him starting. I'm kind of like, well, how
Yeah.
good is that really?
Yeah.
no, he should never start.
No.
Yeah.
A lot of people think he's a great bench player, though, and I'm not really a fan of him off the bench except in very specific scenarios either.
He's a specific type of player. I feel that will help a bench, but it's questionable how much he would really help.
Yeah.
He's closer to Bruce Bowen than Danny Green, if you ask me.
I think Bowen's better.
Bowen is better at making corner threes, but worse at everything else.
I think he's a better defender.
Yeah, Bowen was a good perimeter defender too, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's okay. So he's a better wing defender. Although I think he loses value because so much. I can admit this as a Spurs fan. So much of his defense relied on dirty tricks that wouldn't have been allowed in any time period, but the one he played in.
That's fair.
Yeah, it's true. He's pretty dirty at times, but hey, 2000s basketball, so deal with it, you know.
Bowen also maybe the only player ever to lead the league in 3-point percentage while shooting worse from the free throw line than he did from three.
That's atrocious, man.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. My God. Yeah, I think that like kind of covers it. I think a couple other names that I was going to throw in, but were that lose value. I think Allen Iverson and Isaiah Thomas lose value, but I don't really need to get into that. I think a lot of people understand why they lose value.
I agree with you. Isaiah Thomas should never be drafted.
I agree with you about IT4 never being drafted. I think that is a totally viable opinion there, Cecil. What do you think, Kev? He should definitely be undraftable, right?
Yeah, weigh in on this.
I mean,
I think that says it all.
Oh, really? What's the point of not drafting $3 Lillard?
Oh, here we go.
Louis Dampier is
All-time
amazing.
offensive peak. Oh, yeah, he's good.
In a non-meme way, I do think IT4 kind of in the same sense. Well, not like he's not as good as John Rollins in the same sense that his creation brings a lot of value. IT4 should get more respect in these.
Interesting. I was going to
defense.
say his off-ball game is the best thing about him.
Yeah, for sure. His defense though, you need somebody to cover for him for sure.
Oh, yeah, I agree. Like his flaws are very bad, but his upsides are very high.
Agreed.
I can agree with that.
Adrian Dantley's upsides are pretty good too, and he doesn't get
No, they're
drafted,
not.
So
No, they're
Yeah,
not.
what are
Yeah.
Adrian Dantley's upsides?
He's an efficient scorer, and I mentioned that
Adrian Dantley's only upside is that he's better than Carmelo Anthony and doesn't get drafted.
Wow. Bold.
He's poking at me, Cecil, because he knows I'm a diehard Syracuse fan, and that Carmelo's my hero. So he's just jabbing at me here. But,
Dantley did score. Man, Dantley did score like what 28 per 75 on 65% true shooting or some shit. That's
pretty elite. And you know who Carmelo learned from early in his career, Kev?
Adrian Dantley.
That's damn right. There's a photo of Dantley and Carmelo sitting next together that I just feel is so iconic. Because I think Cecily, were you the one who shared the video of when Carmelo just laid on the floor for 10 seconds, pretending
but
like he was?
When I brought that up, I had no idea that Adrian Dantley had coached him.
I know. And I see Dantley walking out on the court like, what's going on? But I feel like that's something Dantley would have taught Carmelo, to just be as passive as possible. Just pretend you're dead. And then when they come back down the court, the best part is that J.R. Smith was like pointing at Carmelo as a reason why he missed the layup.
Yeah.
That was pretty funny.
J.R. Smith looking at the ref like, yeah, I traveled. What am I supposed to do? Look at this.
I just think it's funny that they just didn't stop the play until after J.R. Smith traveled.
They all saw Carmelo lying down and collectively decided they weren't having that BS.
Yeah, that was an all-time funny moment, definitely, for sure.
Oh yeah.
Shall we move on to the next topic?
Yeah,
I'm ready.
Kind of is like a continuation to the first topic, kind of moving into like budget prices and based on our player opinions. I've asked this in the server a couple times to users like Liam and Rob. But if you had kind of your own like solo drafts budget board, what would you think would be the biggest changes compared to our current Vibe budget board?
Cecil, why don't you go ahead again?
All right, I'll kick it off. Some might say me starting it off this way is predictable, but if I were designing the budget board, Rick Barry would cost a lot more than $11. I understand that we tax him for being a racist, and honestly, that's valid. I understand. Like, I don't want to draft him either. I don't savor it, but if you look at someone like John Havlicek, who's a pretty similar player archetype and costs $20, despite having almost certainly a lower real life peak than Rick Barry. What's he really better at? I mean, maybe he's marginally more portable because of his advanced off-ball game, but I don't think he's really giving you significantly more shooting. He's not as advanced of a playmaker. He's not like quite the same level of off-ball passer that Rick Barry is, and he is almost double the price. I think the gap there is larger than it should be. Maybe you can tax Rick Barry like, I don't know. I don't want to put a dollar number on racism, but
yeah, for sure. I think that I agree with you in that sense. I think Havlicek's an interesting comparison. I do think that Havlicek's a pretty good playmaker, but also in that era you had a lot more possessions because of the pace of play. But
yeah, I mean, full respect to Havlicek as a playmaker. I just think that's Barry's biggest strength.
Did Rick Barry steal the ball though? That's the question.
He didn't steal the ball like John Havlicek stole the ball. I'll tell you
No, he
that.
didn't. Nope, he didn't. He didn't get that amazing call. So there we go. That's why Havlicek's $20. Just kidding. But yeah, I like that comparison. It's true. Why I think on my all-time list, I probably have Rick Barry higher than Havlicek. So it's kind of weird to think that Rick Barry's so low, but then you look like we tend to tax people for the heinous things that they've done in their lifetime. So we don't always look at it with, oh, just basketball mind. It's like, okay, well, Rick Barry's a racist. You know, Karl Malone obviously had his, issues.
Mhm.
So we kind of look at it that way, where it's like, okay, these guys get taxed for being just total douchebags,
Mm.
more or less.
Right.
So I agree that Rick Barry should be a price increase because of just how good of a player he was all time.
I think on basketball skill alone, he's just clearly better than Havlicek. You can put him in the same
Yeah.
tier, but a 2-to-1 ratio,
Right.
Yeah,
that's just
I
over the
think
top for me.
I don't think Barry gets enough credit for his defense either. I think that his defense was pretty solid, and I think it would translate decently well to today's era. So I would trust him definitely on defense.
Yeah, I agree. He had a lot of length, good hands.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to Havlicek defensively. Both excellent defensive players.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
agree with that.
absolutely. I think that a player for me that I would boost the price of is and again, like Cecil, they probably know this one is coming, but it's Wilt Chamberlain. I know
Yeah.
he's already pretty highly priced right now, but when I see him going in the 20s, I start profusely vomiting. Um, I just it bugs me because his peak is so good, and that's what we're basically drafting are these players' peaks. And I think like his value as a playmaker is really going under the radar, and especially his value as a defender. Um, Drafting him anywhere from I would draft him anywhere from probably like 12 to 15, and I think that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
But
he's a
like,
top 15 pick.
yeah, and it's disappointing to see because people have this perception of Wilt as not a team player, which he wasn't always, but he learned how to be one, and I think that's
Yeah.
Wilt's like most underrated aspect is that he does adapt pretty well to changing his game around, even if it
Yeah.
was reluctantly at first, or if he's trying to become the assist leader. But
Right.
in '67 specifically, he was just very very elite. I think it's a player that we should be picking a lot higher than we are. And I always get excited when we get into the 20s and he's still there because I know I can build a good team around him if he's going that late.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think it's easy for people to forget. We pick 67 Wilt. We don't pick 62 Wilt. We don't pick 74 Wilt. We don't pick like the average. We pick 67 Wilt, which is really the year where he put it all together and made smart decisions.
Yeah.
You're getting an all-time great rim protector. You're getting someone who on offense can be a great roll man or a great post-up player, very smart playmaker out of a bunch of different situations. It's
Yeah,
crowded in the top 15, but I certainly think he can be justified much higher than his average position.
Yeah, I agree. 100%.
Yeah, his overall his versatility as a player is really underrated, even though it's a major aspect in these drafts.
Yep. Totally agree. What about you, Kev? Who's somebody that you would boost?
I think that I would boost, kind of I think this is another pick that like a Cecil or a Liam might like, but I would probably boost Dave Cohen's a little bit.
Ooh, big fan.
Yeah, I like that.
I think very underrated defender, a very underrated fit player. Also a really very solid passer for the position. Well, he provides a lot of good like all-time draft values, but is only like $6.
Yeah, I always get excited when he's still there and I can take him because he's a good defender. I think that sometimes we divulge into these conversations about, oh, this person's going to destroy this person because they're bigger than them. But in all
Right.
actuality, I don't think people are going to destroy Dave Cowens by any means. He's a great defender. So
Absolutely.
it just kind of irritates me when I see those conversations. Not trying to call anybody out there.
Is Cowens the second or the third cheapest MVP?
Hmm.
I don't know.
Because Unseld is the cheapest.
I think it would be
Um,
Cohen's in second.
oh, it's Derrick Rose in second. Cowens is $1 more expensive than Rose.
Oh, good. Very cool.
Yeah, that's interesting to think about it like that. I also think Cowens is like a top 10 center of all time. I know we're talking more longevity there, but he's definitely up there in the conversation.
I agree
Oh,
with that. I think when I ranked centers, I ended up having him 10th, if I remember right.
Interesting. Definitely interesting.
yeah. It's a valid take. Like he was really, really good.
I lost my center rankings in the war, so can't go check. I don't know why I didn't save them anywhere but on this server.
Cecil, do you have another person that you would boost?
Yes, actually. This is a $1 player who I think is just overlooked. I think he should be valued much more highly than he is, and that's Eddie Johnson. And this is the good guy, Eddie Johnson, not the Eddie Johnson who died in jail for being a pedophile.
Oh, nice.
Well, this
There's
is
two Eddie
another
Johnsons,
video.
and they were mixed up in real life too.
So this is going to have to be a video I tag as not for children.
Oh, nice.
So well, you can just cut out my mention of the other Eddie Johnson if you want.
Oh no,
But
it's okay.
It's fine.
um, good Eddie Johnson, the third Eddie Johnson on Basketball Reference, was a bench player, sometimes starter in the 80s and 90s, who was just a absolute lights out shooter. His 3 point volume is not mega high. I think he tops out between 2 and 3 attempts per game, but he's around 19, 20 point a game scorer off the bench. And the way he gets a lot of that is what makes him so nice in my mind. He's a very off ball player. He's a little comparable to someone like a Dale Ellis in the way he navigates around screens and gets the ball to score without using up a lot of possession time. And his 3 point percentage increases with volume, which is something I like to look for in these older players where a lot of them are not taking as many threes as they could have because of the way they were coached at the time. If you only look at seasons, his career 3 point percentage is like around 33, 34. But if you limit that to seasons where he takes at least 150 threes, he's shooting like 39% during those seasons. And that is excluding short line years. That's just like full length line. If he's taking a reasonable amount of threes to where, it's not dragged down by heaves and whatnot, he turns into a 39, 40% shooter. Now he's nothing much on defense, but I think he should be at least a few dollars more than $1. We draft someone like a JJ Redick, and I think he can fill that same type of role as just an off-ball bench spark plug.
That's interesting.
And that's definitely an interesting player to shout there. I think
I'll have to look into that. That's a really good mention.
Yeah, for sure. I think
I've
somebody
been
that
drafting him all over the place lately because he's just so cheap and so easy to get in the late rounds.
yeah, for sure. I've been liking your draft choices of late, Cecil. I think you drafted Tom Chambers one time. That was a pretty cool player to draft.
Yeah, I think I took him early on in budget just because I wanted to see him get drafted. He didn't even end up making any sense with my team, but he's a fun player, man. He's like sort of a proto Blake Griffin on offense.
Hmm.
That's
Not the
interesting.
passer Blake is, but the dunks. Oh my gosh.
The dunks.
I think a player that I would boost that's I think he can be a starter, but we kind of have him on the bench. I really, really like Alvin Adams. Um,
Hmm.
he's somebody like I've mentioned this before how much I value playmaking. Alvin is one of the greatest playmaking bigs of all time. Um,
Absolutely.
and I,
Yeah.
I really, really, really like him. And he's especially valuable coming off the bench. I just, I know his defense isn't like ideal, but he's still like so nice to have. That playmaking off the bench is just incredible. And he's definitely somebody that I would boost the price of.
He was in real life, he was part of good defenses too. I think one of the years, I think it's 79 where the Suns were the number one defense, and that's the year I draft because I think he's
Interesting.
peaking on offense there too.
Interesting. Um, I think I usually take his rookie season. Just because again I value playmaking a lot, and that was probably his best playmaking year. Um, I'm sure that's debatable, but um,
No, I
I
think that's fair
really,
to say.
yeah, I think he's just really like underrated, and I don't think a lot of people even know who Alvin Adams is. To be quite honest.
Yeah, he is. I mean, as tends to be the case with Suns players who aren't superstars, he gets overlooked because the Suns never actually made it to the promised land and won a ring. But he was on a lot of very, very good teams for a very long time. Also, as you get into the late 70s, early 80s, his scoring efficiency really spikes.
Interesting. Kev, do you have somebody else you want to boost, or should we move into the drops?
I don't know if I have any more players that I'd really boost. I think just to throw in a player that I'd move down, we've talked about on this pod a couple times before. And my potential like bold take, I think you can argue Klay Thompson below Danny Green in price.
I had the exact same thing in my notes. There's just no reason to take Klay Thompson for $20 when you can get Danny Green for 15, and he's still overpriced, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Clay's somebody who's been through the ringer in all the servers of late. I think somebody brought it up how he's not that good shooting with somebody on him in the playoffs.
Mhm.
Whereas he knocks down the open threes a lot. He's definitely a system player.
Yeah.
Um, and I feel like, and I think people really, really overrate the hell out of his defense. Um,
Oh yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
not even like that great. So it's just it's a thing. If you really like his shooting, people are gonna take him. But it's not like he's some crazy 3-and-D player because his defense is not worthy of that tag. I feel.
Yeah, he's more comparable to someone like a Jaylen Brown on defense, where he's a pretty nice individual defender. He could stay in front of people, he can use his strength. But if you put him off the ball and you try to attack him with cuts and movement, he's going to turn his head a lot of the time and you can beat him.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now, the funny thing is, with all this said, I still kind of think Clay, if he doesn't gain value in an all time draft, he doesn't really lose it either. I just think that his price at some point became so inflated. Like $22 is just more than you should ever pay for like even the best 3 and D players. Like Shane Battier, the ideal 3 and D player is 19.
yeah,
Right.
And Clay is nice because he can fit anywhere. He can guard multiple types of players on the ball, but I don't want to spend over a fifth of my total budget on Clay Thompson.
Right.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. And this is somebody speaking who just drafted Clay Thompson in round 2. So
Ew.
I've just been a big
Yeah.
old hypocrite of late.
Oh
But
my.
but I'm also
Yeah.
willing to try new things. But hey,
Hmm.
I definitely didn't like the pick. It was just a good fit with a LeBron team, I felt. Um, but yeah, taking him in round 2 probably wasn't ideal.
He's also a little more valuable in a standard than he is in budget. Fit tends to boost people in standards so that their budget prices become inflated past the point of return.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, I can agree with that. I think somebody else that I think I would definitely move down, and this is not because he hit a dagger shot against my Kings, but it's Robert Horry. Um, I baffle at his price. I think it's $11.
Hmm.
I mean, he's not even really that elite on defense or really on offense, so I don't know why he goes for so much.
Yeah.
Well, when you
Yeah.
win 7 NBA championships, you work your way into the public consciousness one way or the other.
Yeah,
Right.
it's true, but I think that he's not somebody who I just don't like him as like a 4. Um well, he is a 4, but I don't like him being a starting 4.
Yeah.
I just think that's a little much. Um he's just he's not particularly great at one thing. Um so I just think it's odd seeing his price so high.
Yeah, he's kind of similar to PJ Tucker in some ways, where he's got a lot of skills, but he's not really ATD level good at any of them. Like, he made a ton of big shots, and that causes people to think his shooting numbers should be better than they are, which outside of the short line years, they're extremely underwhelming.
Yeah, for sure. Cecil, you have somebody who you would knock down?
Yeah, I'm gonna go after every all-time draft server's darling here. I think Kevin Garnett, excuse
Hmm.
me. I think Kevin Garnett's price is just too high. I
Hmm.
understand that he's all-time great defensively. You can put him anywhere, but I think he is the epitome of someone who fit just like because of his fit and because of the teams you can build with him. He gets drafted third pretty much every time in standard, and that means he costs $39. And I just don't want to spend 40% of my budget on someone who probably can't be my best offensive player. Maybe you don't even want him to be like your second offensive load bearer, no matter how good his defense is. Like if we're taking Kevin Garnett for $39, it seems like we should pay more than 32 for Bill Russell. I don't know.
Hmm. Yeah, I can agree with that. Um, I think that I'm a little confused why he's such a consensus number 3 pick because I feel like guys like Steph, Shaq, um, and Larry Bird all are viable options as the number 3 pick. But nowadays we're just so locked in on the meta of
Hmm.
him being the third guy that it's just I don't know. I don't think I would take him like that all the time. I just think that it would be nice to see some shake up in that. I think him going maybe 5 to 7 is a little bit better than him going third all the time because any team that I see now of KGs, it just isn't that exciting of a build because everybody builds it so similarly because he's the consensus number 3 pick. So it's like hard to see another team that isn't that is different from what he normally you normally see with him. So
Yeah.
I agree with that. I think he should be lower than he's going for right now, especially when there's guys like Bird and Shaq and even Kareem. I mean, my God, that's somebody who's should be boosted, but we don't do that.
Tim Duncan.
Yep, Tim Duncan. I mean, it's odd seeing, like, I don't know. The Tim Duncan versus Kevin Garnett thing's interesting to me because they're both like equally good defenders, and I feel like they're equally as good on offense and equally good hit wise. So, like, why wouldn't you take Tim even higher than KG? So I just think it's odd.
I think Tim has better load bearing capabilities on offense. I feel much more comfortable taking Tim Duncan and having him be my clear cut best offensive player, leading the scoring charge than I do with Kevin Garnett in that role. And yeah, that's a little less valuable in an all time draft because there are so many scores you can get. But to your point about how like KG builds end up being really samey, when you spend $39 on a guy who isn't going to be your best offensive player, there's only so many directions you can go. And I feel like it causes an over reliance on, all-time great scorers, but guys who have other flaws, like somebody like a Gilbert Arenas or a George Gervin, where you're giving up something else to get that scoring punch that you missed out on in the first round.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's just odd um, that it's just so consensus that he's number 3.
Yeah. Yeah, it really, I mean, there's a reason we have Jordan's and LeBron's price boosted up above the normal scale.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's those two, and then there's a big drop off to what should I feel be a tier, but what has turned into Kevin Garnett and then a tier.
Yeah.
it's weird. It's for sure weird. Um, but hey, maybe we can change that up.
Maybe.
I think another person that I would knock down, and it's another 3-and-D type player. I think I've had a propaganda machine on here of knocking down 3-and-D players, but it would be Robert Covington. I mean, he's $16 right now, and he's such a specific type of defense. While valuable, I just don't think it's worth $16.
Yep.
And even on the offensive end, he's incredibly streaky, and he's not somebody. He's not like a Shane Battier where it's consistent. I feel like Shane Battier is way more consistent on the offensive end, has a higher IQ on the offensive end, whereas Rocco feels like he doesn't have any of that on the offensive end.
Yeah.
And he's a really good weak side help defender, which is great. But when you put him in a man situation, I feel like where he's just playing straight up, he's not as valuable.
Yeah, I'd agree. Just in general, his value, like, he gets a lot of the big, like, 3-and-D, ATD crowd inflation.
Yeah, compared to the really elite 3-and-D players like Shane Battier, Michael Cooper, he just has more flaws that you can attack.
Right.
He's not quite as well rounded as those guys, although fascinatingly, despite playing a less valuable position ostensibly and having more flaws, and generally, I think everyone would agree that you would prefer Michael Cooper over Robert Covington in on an all-time draft.
Yeah.
Covington is $1 more expensive.
Right. That's something that's definitely got to change in future standard drafts and ADP drafts.
Where do you guys think a Robert Covington should be going in a draft?
Wherever PJ Tucker goes right now, you can just move Covington down to that spot and then move PJ Tucker off the board.
Ooh.
PJ Tucker now undraftable.
Robert Covington in an ATD probably has the same impact as PJ Tucker in real life.
That's interesting. I don't know if I'd do him that dirty. I was thinking more like $10, $11, like Robert Horry range.
Well, I noticed that Sully in my draft because we did an auction type one. He bid $8 for Robert Covington, and nobody outbid him. And I think that's the perfect price for him, is in that range, because
Yeah, that's fair.
he just takes up so much of your budget if you take him
Right.
early on. So I just don't think it's worth it,
Yeah.
especially for somebody who's just such a specific type of defense and
Yeah.
not that good on the offensive end.
Yeah, I agree. He's filling in very specific needs, so for the price that he's not really worth it unless you like really, really need him, which isn't really all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
That Robert Horry comp is an interesting one.
Yeah. It's
Price
true.
wise, I feel like if Robert Horry is $11 and Robert Covington can probably be $11 while Horry gets smacked down to like $2.
Oh wow. Okay.
You
I'm
said I
fine
was
with that.
being harsh.
I'm
Good
fine with
Lord.
Horry just not being draftable just because of what he did to my Kings.
No.
He ruined their chance.
Realistically, I would put Horry like for my ideal Horry price like $5 maybe.
What was the conversation the other day? I don't remember what server it was in, but someone asked, like, what would the value be of a player who can only play one possession in a game, but he is guaranteed to make a shot on that possession? And I feel like that
Ooh.
is basically just Robert Horry.
I can agree with that, which is why we're boosting his price back up to 11 instead of $2.
Oh no.
Way to go, Cecil.
Oh.
Yeah. I just feel like 3-and-D guys, I feel like there's a tier of 3-and-D guys that are kind of worth their price. I think Shane Battier is one. I think Michael Cooper is one, and I think Doug Christie is one.
Yeah.
In terms of the other guys, I'm just not sure about them in terms of being at that level. So yeah,
Man, I got a
don't
hard
know.
time paying $15 for Doug Christie.
Did you
Oh.
really? I think that's fine. I think that he's he fits really well. I think that's why a lot of people draft him, and that's why it's his price. But I wouldn't give you a hard time for that.
He is an easy fit. I wish he were a little bit better of a shooter, though. I think his spacing value is kind of overstated.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that for sure.
I just struggle with 3-and-D players in budget in general, though. Like even Battier, who I think the spot he goes in standard is completely appropriate, but it makes him $19 in budget. And I don't. That's just a lot of money to spend on any 3-and-D player, no matter how good they are.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Do you guys have anybody else that you would knock down?
Y'all already hit Clay, so
Yeah.
that's everybody on my list.
I think I'll just run through three that are bigger names, and that's Nowitzki, Paul Pierce, and Brandon Roy. I think Brandon Roy goes way too high, but I think a lot of people would probably agree with that just because I don't know how much value. It's kind of like a Klay Thompson situation. Just he's. I don't know how much value he's bringing to you as like a round 2 type guy.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much wraps up my list for down. The guys I boosted were the guys I wanted to boost, so happy I got those guys out there.
Yeah.
Clyde Drexler steal at 21. I think Clyde Drexler should go up, but I just thought of that right now, so I don't have a whole info dump like I did for the other guys.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Shall we
that's
move
about
on?
it for me.
Shall we move on
Yeah,
to the
we can
fun part?
move. Yeah, we can get to our big time budget challenge here.
Oh yeah. So this week last week it was obviously the $90 MJ team. This
Mm-hmm.
week we decided we were chatting about it in general chat, and Kev proposed the idea of doing a lineup where the center of the team can't be listed as or no player on the team can be listed as a big on the ADP sheet. So
Yep.
this was definitely a fun challenge, kind of like running a bit of a small ball lineup. But I think we had fun doing this one. So who would like to start?
I
I'll go
started all the
first.
other topics. Someone else can go.
Yeah.
Kev, why don't
I'll
you
go.
go?
I had the Cleveland Guardians. I started Isaiah Thomas, Walt Frazier, Alex English, Bobby Jones, and Kevin Durant. And then off my
Yeah, I
bench,
really like.
sorry.
Go ahead.
Off my bench, I had Kirk Heinrich, Jake Van Arnsdale, Nicholas Batum, Dave DeBusschere, then Orlando Woolridge.
Yes, your favorite Orlando Woolridge.
Ah,
I really
yes.
like the Kevin Durant at center move just because of the spacing and the length he provides. I think is valuable in that sense.
Yeah.
Plus, you got Bobby Jones next to him, was a good defender. Well, actually, great defender, but
Yeah.
I think that's
I
a really
wonder.
nice fit.
I wonder if it's just Bobby Jones at center.
No. No,
On
no.
offense, it is.
Maybe. But
Yeah, I think on offense it would be just because of the spacing of Durant. Really, he's not a
yeah.
quote unquote center.
No
But
center is guarding Kevin Durant.
no, they're gonna get put in a blender.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah,
think
I
the
like it.
I think the double point guards is an interesting choice here.
Mm.
Mm. Yeah, I've always felt like Frazier slots well to 2.
He definitely
Yeah,
has a lot of strength to move up onto bigger guys,
Yeah.
and he certainly covers for Isaiah.
Yeah. That was kind of the intention. I feel like Frazier has the size to slot there, and just in general, he's a really good cover for someone like IT4.
and IT4 needs it. And
Yep.
but
I
this
Yeah,
is
I
feel
have
like
to
also an
admit I
offense.
have my reservations about starting IT4 on a team without a true center.
I mean, I think that it works in this sense. I know there isn't a true center, um, but if we look at this like, oh, all these teams are going to be in the same league and there's no true center, I think it works just fine.
Yeah, I feel like this is a team, like, considering the situation, the draft challenge, I feel like this is a solid IT4 team and a solid KD team.
Yeah, for sure. I tend to agree with that. Oh,
I love to see Dick Van Arsdale on your bench, by the way.
Of course.
That's another guy who should be more than $1.
there's a lot of guys who should be more than $1 for sure. And one of them's on my bench.
Ooh.
So I think that to explain our team names, we're going because the Cleveland baseball team just changed from the Indians, which is obviously not the best name to have nowadays, to the Cleveland Guardians. So we went with Cleveland baseball names throughout the years. So Kev was the Cleveland Guardians. I'm the Cleveland Spiders, and Cecil will share his wonderful name in a minute here. So I'll list off my team that I went with. I went Mark Price at point guard. I went Luca at the 2, Paul Pressey at the 3, Rodman at the 4, and Shard at the 5. I really like Shard at the 5. I think that's a nice spacing team. And again, probably on defense and on offense, I would say Rodman maybe is, but I also picked the Rodman year where he can pretty much guard 1 through 5.
Yeah.
So, and then
Yeah, I
my bench,
love the young Rodman pick. I think old Rodman got a little bit overrated because he picked up a lot of fake rebounds.
Yeah, I've begun taking young Rodman. I just think that he's more versatile on defense than he
I
was in
agree.
92. Um, so then for the bench, I decided to go with more playmaking because why not? I went with Donovan Mitchell, uh, Tony Allen, obviously not the playmaking guy I'm talking about, but I wanted to get a nice defender in there. Roger Brown, someone from the ABA that deserves a boost. This is the $1 guy I think should be more than what he's priced, and that's Jamal Wilkes. I think he's an incredibly underrated player all time. And I've been drafting him a lot more because I feel like he deserves that boost for somebody who would probably be a pretty decent spacer nowadays, is a good defender, um, smooth as all hell, just a really good all around player. And then at
Great
center,
at
I went
playing
with
with other stars.
yes, absolutely. Um, and then at center, I went with Larry Johnson, who's a bit undersized, but his strength certainly makes up for it in that regard. So I really like this team because I went with three different types of playmakers in the starting lineup. So like Mark Price is a really good off ball guy, Luka's really good on ball, and then Paul Pressey's a really nice ancillary playmaker. Um, I always like getting playmaking guys. I think you can never have enough passing just to make the offense more fluid, which is why I went with um, three guys of Mitchell, Brown, and Johnson, who are all pretty decent playmakers. And Wilkes himself is also a pretty good playmaker.
He's an
Um,
intelligent extra passer.
yep, for sure. Um, my defense may be questionable, but again, in the sense of an ATD, if we're every team in the league is going to be without a true center, I don't mind this, and especially having Rodman and Pressey there, I think they can provide some nice cover. And Shard's obviously a positive on defense, but he's not like top positive guy. But yeah, I enjoyed building this. This is one of the more favorite teams I've built. I just liked I really liked the challenge.
Yeah, when I first looked at it, I was thinking, wow, you have a lot of playmaking. What's the idea here? But when you explain it like different types of playmaking, where Price is the on-ball guy, Price is the off-ball guy, Doncic is the on-ball guy, and then Pressey is like the fill in the gaps, attack off the catch, stuff like that. That makes a lot of sense, and I see how it works.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was going for, and glad you picked up on it. Why don't you share your lovely Cleveland name?
All right, so my team is the Cleveland Infants, a baseball team that existed for 1 year as part of a strike by the Major League Baseball players in like the 1890s. Um, so as I've been doing in budget lately, I went full on big three. I spent $85 on three of my players. Or actually, I think I spent more than that. Let's see. Yeah, okay. I spent $89 on a core of Stephen Curry, Kobe Bryant, and Andrei Kirilenko. And then with the remaining $11, I started Raja Bell and Royce O'Neal. And then my bench of $1 guys is Johnny Moore, Joe Harris, Eddie Johnson, Andre Roberson, and Larry Kennan.
Mm. Some unique guys that you threw out there that are not always drafted, like a Johnny Moore and a Larry Kennan. I really like those. You've been boosting Johnny Moore lately, which I like to see.
Spurs legend. Same with Kennan.
Yeah, I
Yeah, and
like
there's
that team.
I talked about Eddie Johnson earlier, but the idea with this team is just run everything through the three stars. Steph and Kobe can take turns running PNR with Kirilenko. And, Raja and Royce are just there to make open shots and to play defense. And pretty much the same thing with everything on the bench. Um, Moore and Roberson are there to add some defense. Harris and Johnson are the shooters. And then I threw Larry Kennan on here because I wasn't really sure what to do at backup non-center, and he's a guy who I think should get drafted more often. Really cool, like budget Dr. J type. Just a super athletic playmaking forward who can kind of score, play defense, just do whatever you need him to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can agree with that for sure. I really like the team, especially because you had to only have a $5 bench, which is really hard to pull off now. But I really liked it, like just the uniqueness of the player. Because I think the 2021 Joe Harris, while it was a great regular season, that postseason was just horrendous.
Yeah.
So I like that you went that route.
Yeah, I've never seen someone look so bad while shooting 40% from three.
Right.
Yeah,
it was bad.
He seemed really off. But yeah,
I think realistically he's probably the same level of player in 19, 20, and 21, though.
Yeah, I can agree with that. For sure. I really liked our teams this one. I thought it was a fun challenge.
Yeah, I thought we all had a different take on it, and it was props to Kev for coming up with that idea because it was very fun to build.
Yeah. Totally agree.
It ended up being really fun.
So again, as always, you guys should vote in the comment section which team's your favorite, or you can just tell us in server.
Do your civic duty.
Yes, do your duty as a server member and tell us which team you like best.
Yeah, I'll do my part and I'll comment I had the best team. I'll use my YouTube channel.
Yep. I will spread propaganda far and wide about how great the Cleveland Spiders are and how it should have been the real name of the new Cleveland Indians. So I'll do what I have to.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a pretty good show. Nice having Cecil on for sure.
It took me a minute to settle in. This is the first podcast I've ever been on.
You
did great. Comfortable.
Yeah,
I got comfortable after a few minutes.
Yeah, you just got to think like you're not being recorded. You guys will see. You guys will see at the end here. I'll put in a little blooper.
We have to edit this in at the end. Yeah.
It's an all-time moment.
Listen, they did not warn me.
But it was definitely a great moment. I enjoyed that. I think it got us all a little bit looser too, ready for the podcast. So
real icebreaker.
For sure. This is something that I'm pretty used to doing because I majored in sports media in college, so I'm pretty comfortable nowadays on podcasts. But you did a really nice job, Cecil, for somebody who's never done one of these before, for sure.
Well, thanks. I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, this was a really good episode, and we were really glad to have you. Hopefully, we can do this again in the future.
Yeah, for sure. I had fun.
Good.
I enjoyed being on.
I think that about wraps it up this week, then.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see you guys next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
See you at some undefined time, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see you guys. Peace.
Peace.
Holy
ladies
shit.
and Cecil.
Sorry, I wasn't ready for how his voice sounded.
All right, I'm gonna end this one because that was